Okay, we're back. Chapter 4, EKG, the electrical conduction system. So what are we going to talk about? That's a good question. Let's talk about identifying and discussing the location and function of all these things that you see. The SA node, the internodal pathways, Bachman's bundle, the AV node, the bundle of His, the AV junction, the bundle branches, the Purkinje network. We got a lot of things. And then we're going to talk about the normal path of an impulse traveling through the electrical conduction system. So here's what we're going to be looking at the whole time. You see at the top left of your screen the SA node dropping down to the AV node into the junction and just all traveling all the way through the bundle branches and the Purkinje fibers. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's talk about the heart's natural pacemaker. That's going to be the SA node. So you can see on your screen, it's located in the upper posterior part of the right atrial wall. Now think of it as a starting point for the electrical impulses that keep the heart beating. So here's something interesting. About 50% of the cells in the SA node are actual pacemaker cells. The other cells aren't pacemaker, but they help to conduct those electrical impulses throughout the heart. Now you'll often hear it referred to as the primary pacemaker of the heart because it sets the pace for the rest of the heart's electrical system. So its firing rate's usually between 60 to 100 beats a minute, and that's a typical resting heart rate of an adult. So once the SA node fires, it sends an electrical impulse that causes the atria to depolarize, which is the trigger for them to contract and push blood into the ventricles. So this impulse sets the whole process of heartbeats into motion. Now that the SA node's fired, send an impulse out, we need a way to get that signal across the atria and toward the ventricles. So this is where the internodal pathways come in. You'll see with the little yellow arrow. So these pathways, they act as like a conductor that makes sure the electrical impulse is properly distributed through the atria. Essentially, they're like this electrical highway that carries the impulse from the SA node to the AV node, or the atrioventricular node. So think of it this way. The impulse needs to travel smoothly from the top of the heart, the atria, to the middle, the AV node, and these pathways make sure that happens quickly and efficiently. So without these internodal pathways, the impulse might get stuck or delayed, which could mess with the heart's rhythm. So these pathways help keep everything flowing and ensure the heart is in sync. All right, now let's talk about a special part of the internodal pathway. So that's Bachman's bundle. You might also hear it referred to as Winkie-Bach's bundle or Thorell's pathway. Don't let the different names confuse you. It's all the same bundle. So what exactly is it? Bachman's bundle is a group of interatrial fibers that are located in the left atrium. Now these fibers are like specialized wires that help conduct the electrical impulse from the SA node to the left side of the heart. So here's something cool. It's actually a subdivision of the anterior internodal tract. Its main job is to make sure that the electrical impulse doesn't go to the right atrium, but also reaches the left atrium, ensuring both sides of the heart are in sync when they contract. So you think about it, Bachman's bundle is the reason the left atrium gets its electrical signal from the SA node and starts contracting at the same time as the right atrium. Now, after the impulse travels through the internodal pathways, it reaches the AV node, or the atrioventricular node. That's a critical point in the electrical conduction system. Now, where is it located? The AV node sits on the floor of the right atrium, just above the tricuspid valve, so it's in a pretty key spot, right in the middle of the action. So what does the AV node do? One of its main jobs is to delay the electrical impulse by about 0.05 seconds. So this delay might sound small, but it's incredibly important. It gives the atria enough time to finish contracting and fully empty the blood into the ventricles before the ventricles start contracting themselves. So without that delay, the ventricles wouldn't have enough time to fill with blood properly, and then the heart wouldn't pump efficiently. So this little pause is like a little breather that just lets helps the heart work smoothly. Now let's talk a little more about the AV node. So not only is it important for delaying the electrical signal, but it's also the only pathway that allows electrical impulses from the atria to travel down to the ventricles. So if you think about it, the AV node is like the gatekeeper, and you're going to hear that word a lot throughout EKG. So remember, the AV node is like the gatekeeper that makes sure the electrical signal passes through to the lower chambers of the heart. So without it, the ventricles wouldn't know when to contract and the heart wouldn't beat properly. So while the SA node is the primary pacemaker, the AV node can also act as a secondary pacemaker. If the SA node for any reason isn't working or there's a block in the pathway, the AV node can take over. Now its intrinsic firing rate is around 40 to 60 per minute, which obviously is slower than the SA nodes. Remember, it's 60 to 100. So while the AV node isn't the first choice, it's like a backup generator. So if the main pacemaker fails, the AV node steps up to keep the heart beating, but it is at a slower rate. Now that we talked about the AV node, let's move on to the AV junction. So this is where the AV node connects with the bundle of His, which is kind of like the bridge between the upper and the lower parts of the heart's electrical system. So the AV junction serves as that transition point between the atria or the upper chambers and the ventricles, those lower chambers. So once the electrical impulse is delayed in the AV node, it moves on to the bundle of His, which carries it down towards the ventricles. So that's where the action starts to move from the atria to the ventricles, getting ready for the ventricles to contract and pump the blood out of the body and the lungs. Or out to the body, not out of the body. Out to the body and the lungs. So think of the AV junction as the key connector. It connects the upper chambers with the lower chambers, making sure the heart's electrical system stays coordinated and in sync. Now, what happens if the SA node isn't working right, or its firing rate slows down too much? That's where the AV junction comes into play as a secondary pacemaker. So if the SA node fails or slows down below its normal rate, that AV junctional tissue can step in and start its own electrical activity. So even though it's not as fast as the SA node, it'll start pacing the heart at about 40 to 60 beats a minute, just like we talked about earlier. So this ensures the heart keeps beating and blood keeps moving even if the SA node isn't doing its job properly. Now another interesting thing is that there's an accessory pathway, sometimes called a bypass tract. It's an irregular muscle connection between the atria and the ventricles. It doesn't involve the AV node at all. Now normally the impulse, that electrical impulse, must pass through the AV node before it gets to the ventricles, but with an accessory pathway, the impulse can bypass the AV node entirely and then just travel directly from the atria to the ventricles. Now that can cause some abnormal heart rhythms because the electrical signal might be moving too quickly or out of sync. So an accessory pathway can lead to things like SVT, things like WPW, where the heart beats very fast because of this extra route for the electrical impulse. All right, let's talk about the bundle of His now. That's a key part of the heart's electrical system. This is the conduction pathway that leads out of the AV node and towards the ventricles. So think of the bundle of His as the highway that carries the electrical signal from the AV node down to the left and right bundle branches. Without it, the signal couldn't reach the ventricles and we'd have problems with the heart's pumping action. So location-wise, the bundle of His lies at the top of the interventricular septum. That's what separates the left and the right ventricles. It's also referred to as the common bundle because it's shared route that leads into both the left and the right sides of the heart. And just like the other parts of the heart's electrical system, the bundle of His gets its blood directly from the left anterior and posterior descending coronary arteries. That means the bundle needs a good blood flow to stay healthy and function properly. Now, besides being crucial as a conduction pathway, the bundle of His also has the ability to self-initiate electrical activity. So that means that if something goes wrong with the electrical system above it, the bundle of His can step in and become a secondary pacemaker. Now, if it has to take over, the intrinsic firing rate of the bundle of His is around 40 to 60 beats a minute, which is way slower than the SA node and the AV node, but it's enough to keep the heart pumping at a basic level. So remember, The bundle of His is also the connection between the upper and lower chambers of the heart. It serves as the bridge that allows the electrical signals to pass from the atria down to the ventricles, getting them ready to contract and pump blood. All right, now that we've covered a bundle of His, let's move on to its next step in the conduction pathway. So the bundle of His doesn't just stay as one single pathway, it divides into two main branches, the right bundle branch and the left bundle branch. So these branches are like two major highways, so one for the right side, one for the left side of the heart. They carry the electrical impulse from the bundle of His down to the Purkinje fibers, which are responsible for spreading that signal throughout the ventricles. So here's an important part. The right bundle branch carries the electrical signal to the right ventricle, while the left bundle branch does the same for the left ventricle. And this division helps make sure that both sides of the heart are activated properly and in sync, so the ventricles can contract effectively and pump blood out to the lungs and to the rest of the body. Now we've reached the final part of this electrical conduction system that we've been talking about, the Purkinje network. So these are some specialized fibers that spread out throughout the ventricles from the end of the bundle branches. So think of the Purkinje fibers as the final delivery system. So they carry the electrical impulse directly to the ventricular muscle cells, making sure that the ventricles contract and pump blood effectively. So the Purkinje network itself can act as a backup pacemaker too, if needed, but its intrinsic firing rate is around 20 to 40 beats a minute, much slower than those other pacemakers like the SA node or the AV node. However, if all else fails, that Purkinje fibers can step in and keep the heart beating just at a much slower rate. Obviously, you're going to probably have much lower cardiac output also, so that you can hopefully see the problems. So even though those Purkinje network jobs to transmit the impulse to the ventricles, it also has the ability to step up if the heart needs a backup rhythm. Well, here's kind of what we've been talking about. You see the review of the electrical system. We see the SA node, 60 to 100, internodal pathways. That's just that transfer system. AV junction, AV node and bundle slows the impulse, 40 to 60 rate, bundle branches, Purkinje network. And then just the whole electrical conduction system, almost in just a little picture to give you an idea of all the steps. But what we're saying, is the electrical conduction system of the heart, it's just really just this well-running machine working together. We're talking about when it's working right now, but it's all built to help keep our heart beating smoothly. So it all starts with the SA node, so that's that natural pacemaker. It generates that electrical impulse that's spread through the atria, making them contract and push blood into the ventricles. Then the impulse travels to the AV node, which acts as a gatekeeper, slowing down the signal before it moves to the bundle of His. Now that bundle divides it into the right and left bundle branches, and that sends those signals to the ventricles. And then finally, what we just covered, the Purkinje network, it delivers those impulses directly to the ventricular muscle cells, ensuring the heart pumps effectively. So if anything goes awry, parts of the system, like the bundle of His or even the Purkinje fibers, they can step in as backup pacemakers to hopefully keep that heart rhythm steady and the blood flowing. And it's a quickie, so we'll talk to you next time.